Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. Ben Kinsley's not able to join us tonight, but joining me is an old friend, Sue Minter. Welcome.
Great to be here with you,
so
Pat.
Exciting. Sue's energy just kind of comes over, and we'll share that energy. Could you, everybody knows who you are, I'm sure, but maybe share a little background with, and why you are now the president and CEO of Special Olympics Vermont.
That's right, Pat. It's my newest job, which I'm so honored to be a part of. Like you, I was once the Secretary of Transportation. Right. And like you, I served in the legislature in the House with you. I also worked for the Agency of Commerce. So really, I've had over 15 years.
When were you in Commerce?
I was there when you were Secretary of Transportation. I was in the Planning Division doing the Downtown Revitalization Program.
Nice.
So, because my degree is actually in planning. And I've thought a lot about transportation and land use and many, many issues, many different hats like we all do in Vermont. Yeah. And after my unsuccessful run for governor, I was really thinking about how else I can be involved in, I guess, making the world a better place. And got asked to think about this job. And the more I learned about what Special Olympics in Vermont is all about, the more it has just been a terrific match. I'm a lifelong athlete, played many, many sports throughout my life, and I also have coached 2 different sports for 13 years each with both of my kids, and I really understand personally the power of sports, what being involved in sports can do for an individual and what teamwork can do, and I see that power, that transformational power every day for our athletes with intellectual disabilities who we're committed to serving all year long with great sports opportunities and other programs.
I have to tell you, when I was doing the research for the show and coming up with the questions, I just thought, and I told you this before the show, what a perfect match. Seriously, and these kids, you just have to like them and love them, and they'll love you back 100 times fold. I mean, I just can't imagine a more wonderful place to work. I'm sure they're so appreciative.
It is really inspiring. It's uplifting, as much for our volunteers, for our staff, for our coaches, and we have thousands of them throughout the state who are involved in, as I say, really making a difference in people's lives. And to have that experience is so rewarding.
Yeah, I just think it's... Now, could you talk a little bit about Special Olympics as an entity, as what it does? And I mean, well, later we'll get into all the programs you offer for these kids. It's incredible.
Great, because few people really know that.
I was stunned, to tell you the truth.
So was I, the more I learned about it. You know, I think we have a great brand because people know that everyone loves the Olympics and aspires to be an Olympian. And what's amazing is the history that in 1968, Eunice Kennedy Shriver really created this dream. So Eunice is the sister of John F. Kennedy, our president, in the early 60s. But they had another sibling who I personally hadn't known about, Rosemary.
Right.
Rosemary had intellectual disabilities. And Rosemary and sister Eunice were very, very close. And of course, the Kennedy family, not just well endowed, very athletic. And Eunice saw that Rosemary had tremendous capability, but that she had many barriers. And Eunice was dedicated to removing those barriers and creating opportunity for people with intellectual disabilities. This was at a time, Pat, when people were routinely institutionalized. We were not thinking about and certainly not understanding the potential of people with disabilities. So she first had a camp, Camp Shriver, and this is the early 60s. It was pretty radical for that time to bring hundreds of children with intellectual disabilities of all races to her family compound, and they had summer camp.
Great.
And then that grew into the dream of the Olympics. So 50 years ago this summer, in July 22nd, was the very first Special Olympics in Chicago. And this being the 50th anniversary of this tremendous organization, there's going to be a wonderful celebration. And we in Vermont are also recognizing this incredible moment for what is now, you know, began as a way to bring athletes with disabilities, opportunity, engagement, friendship, and it's really transformed now into a movement, a global movement for inclusion.
That's great. It's staggering when you think about it in the 60s. And we were just talking about when people say things and use what today would be the incorrect words, because you didn't know anything back in the 60s, and you needed to be educated. And Eunice came out there and did this amazing thing, and people went, wow. I mean, what the talent that some of these children have.
She won an ESPY award in 2017, and it's actually something that really changed and affected me to watch the award and the movie about her documentary. Really, what a fighter, and what a firebrand, and what a great leader, and what she's accomplished. So now, this little idea of hers 50 years ago, 170 countries, 4 million athletes and participants around the globe. So I'm not just working for Vermont athletes with disabilities. I am actually part of this international movement where it's happening across this country, different programs, and really changing, I think, our understanding of what's possible, demonstrating how we break down barriers, and through inclusive engagements and programs that we'll talk about, I think really changing the next generation. We're calling it the inclusion generation.
Excellent. Oh, well, that's very apropos for sure. So talking about the programs and stuff, I can't imagine you can list them off, but you have 13 Olympic-type sports. And they range from, I mean, it's a very interesting
I can try to list them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, in the Winter Games, we had winter sports. We had downhill racing, ski racing.
Right.
We had snowshoe racing. We had cross-country racing. We had snowboarding. So 4 games.
Right.
Next up, we'll, in June, have our Summer Olympics where we play basketball and bocce.
Oh, I love bocce.
And I do want to mention that right now it's the second week of what we call unified basketball. This is a VPA, Vermont Principals Association, sanctioned varsity sport.
Oh,
this
really?
is the second year the VPA is sanctioned as a varsity sport. So we bring kids with and without disabilities on a team together.
Excellent.
There are states in this country where 100% of the schools participate. We have this summer, or this season, 16. And I want to get it much bigger.
Sure.
Because what I've learned is it's obviously amazing for our athletes. They talk about, and I've gotten to meet quite a few and really understand what unified sports has meant to them. But talking about when they've received a pass from a varsity athlete, you know, normally they walk through the halls of their high school and they don't even make eye contact.
Right, right.
After receiving a pass, you know, just from a varsity athlete, really seeing for themselves, seeing what their abilities are and not just their disabilities.
Right.
We talk about in classrooms and schools which have really embraced this movement, this idea of inclusion, where in the cafeteria it used to be that the kids with intellectual disabilities sit. Now they go in, they can't find their athletes because they're everywhere.
That's right.
And that's what we're doing
What
by
an opportunity for
culture.
the athletes, for the varsity athletes, to say, hey.
And it's as transformational for them as it is for those with disabilities.
I would think
because
so.
they get more than they give. It's incredible, and I certainly experienced that.
That's great.
So I was talking about the sports. So we've got summer bocce, we've got basketball, and I told you about the unified basketball. We also in the fall have soccer, including unified soccer teams. We have golf and softball. We have something called floorball, which is sort of indoor hockey.
Oh, cool.
We have swimming and bowling.
Oh, my
so
word.
I think I listed all 13. I may have missed some, but those are
you have, as you've just mentioned, you've got 4 statewide competitions, and then it's winter, summer, fall, and holiday games.
Right.
So they must be special.
And it is relatively new that we've grouped them this way, but this enables us to have a big gathering. I mean, last weekend in Pico, Vermont, we had 250 athletes over a 3-day period. And it required 150 volunteers to make these games possible. Wow. And I heard so much, I experienced so much joy and so much love and, you know, pride, and really changing what's people's understanding of what's possible, and it's really exciting.
Did you have a huge crowd of people watching?
We did have, it's primarily family members,
right.
but we did a lot of promotion, and I think we're going to grow. This is the first year we've been in Pico. Before this, for about a decade, we were in Woodstock and at Suicide 6. And it was a wonderful community that really embraced our work and our athletes. They got to stay at the Woodstock Inn, but we've outgrown that space. So this is the first year we moved to Pico, which was fantastic. Their whole team really worked hard to make it work.
And that's so centrally located too. It's easy to get to right on 4.
And we had a lot of teams from Rutland, and I think businesses are supporting us. We had tremendous sponsorship. The hospital was our main sponsor, also Casella, Phoenix Books, Rutland Auto. We had wonderful support from our business community as well.
Shout out to them. Thank you,
Karis
gentlemen.
Reels.
Yeah. That's great. That's really awesome. Well, it's local. It's local kids, local families.
But we are statewide, and I do want to emphasize that we actually have programs, local programs or chapters, you might call them, in every county of Vermont. Again, run by volunteers who are tirelessly recruiting athletes, recruiting and helping to train coaches so that people from all over the state can be involved. We had a huge team at Winter Games from Caledonia County.
Excellent.
So there's wonderful pride and there's real sort of regional pride.
From a schedule, because I know you've got year-round things going on all year round.
We do.
And we'll get to that. But you've got people in schools.
Right.
So kids can go to their schools, can go to a county meeting, and can go to the state meeting.
Exactly. So the school programs,
a lot of organizing.
Yes, we rely primarily on the schools to really, like the Vermont Principals Association Basketball League. It's a full-on league. We'll have a state championship on May 10th at UVM.
Oh, nice.
And it will be packed. And the fans really come out for that. And there is wonderful school and community pride. In addition to the school programs, where there's also bowling and bocce and soccer and basketball, all unified sports, i.e. inclusive, with people with and without disabilities on teams together. We also have community-based programs. We have rec programs. We're going to be playing basketball at Norwich University. Our colleges, many of them are involved in helping do recreation programs. There's just so many different programming.
No, I was surprised about the year-round.
Year-round.
All I know is the Olympics, the actual 4 games. That's what I hear about. And I'm assuming the viewers, that's what they know.
Right. I think most people's perception and mine before this, 2 key things: that Special Olympics is specifically focused on people with intellectual disabilities. We do have a wonderful partnership with Vermont Adaptive, so people with physical disabilities also compete in our games, but as an organization around the globe, it's intellectual disabilities. And the other thing is that I think my perception previously was that there'd be one major event. No, we actually have games throughout the year because we want people to be engaged in health and fitness throughout the year.
Yes, and then you've got them in the U.S., one central location, 4 times a year, and then you've got worldwide events, which you just came back from, right? Did you go to the Austria?
I was not able to go, but I will be going to, thank you for mentioning it, USA Games. It's once every 4 years.
Oh, that's what it was. Sorry.
And we are sending a team of athletes from Vermont, 22 athletes, including one of our unified basketball teams.
Wonderful.
And at that event in Seattle in July, there will be something like 4,000 athletes and 14 different games. So it's going to be an incredible week. So it's just like
the Olympics, every 4 years. Oh,
exactly.
I didn't catch that. That's
every
great.
4 years. And then we do 4 major games with multiple sports in each game.
That's great.
But in addition, you can do school sports and recreation sports.
Well, as you know, I had a friend of mine, Holly. I just went Holly Chase. Tried to get her other name, Holly Scudder Chase. Sorry, Holly. But she went over to Austria and she sent back all these pictures on her Facebook. And I've been bugging her to see all the pictures that she has because she had an amazing time. She just came back just so thrilled that she went and had the ability to participate.
And our ability to send our athletes as well as our volunteers. Holly is what we call a venue director, so she plays a very significant, critical role at our winter sports, running all of the different winter events.
Well, she can do that. If anybody can organize something, it's Holly. So, I was trying to figure out how to talk about the athletes when they come to you. I hope I expect. How do you identify their level of talent and their ability to be competitive, because that's a trick, to be competitive and to lose and to win and to have that competitiveness and the skills. How do you get them to that level and say you can go to the USA Olympics? How do you figure that all out?
Well, we have a system of competition, and but our goal really isn't about weeding people out based on their ability. It's in fact the opposite. It's including people irrespective of their abilities.
Oh, that's great. Good for you.
So, for example, when we play this unified sports and we have varsity basketball players playing with our Special Olympic athletes, the so-called partners, those without disability, their role is focused exclusively on facilitating play. So they're not allowed to shoot, they're not allowed to block, they can give passes. So it's all about helping the whole team be more successful and more competitive. And we want to accept every athlete and give them opportunity, and everyone really is a winner. We do have gold, silver, and bronze medalists, but if you compete in one of our big games, you're going to get a participation ribbon. And I want to mention another thing that few people know about, which is a wonderful partnership with law enforcement. Around the globe, actually, Special Olympics has this partnership with law enforcement. So here in Vermont, we have something called the Law Enforcement Torch Run. So we have police officers across this state doing a passing of the torch. They do a run from the four corners of the state and meet to light the eternal flame
like
of
a
hope.
spoke of a wheel.
Yes.
Sort of thing. Oh, wonderful.
And they raise money for us, and at every one of our games, they award the medals. So we had a team of 6 law enforcement officials who braved the cold in their uniforms to award these medals, and I think it means so much to our athletes. And of course, it's about building community with and among our law enforcement.
That's great. You remind me of, I should say that my father was take 2 seconds here, was a coach of a baseball team, young kids. And the fathers would get really mad if my father would put everybody in, and they wanted the kids who could win the game to be put in, and they would have more fights, and my father would yell at them saying, every kid is going to play, I don't care what happens. It's about the sport and playing.
I mentioned I was a coach for 13 years of soccer, and I carried that philosophy as well. But you can, you can still be a winning team when you put everybody in equally.
Especially
it's about
if they've got the
subbing
energy.
wisely.
Yeah,
yes,
and
it is
desire.
really about the love of the team, and I think that's obviously what Special Olympics is about.
So I'm thinking of all these trips. Where does your funding come from? Is it federal?
No.
Oh,
we have to raise our money.
Well, pay
so I'm
attention,
very
people.
glad you mentioned that. There is a federal education grant that many states receive. We do receive a pass-through for our Unified Champion Schools program, but the vast majority, 95% of our dollars are raised. You may have heard of the penguin plunge.
Yes, we know that.
So we jumped in at 14 degrees. We had 1,200 people plunging. We raised over $500,000.
Oh,
and
great.
I have to give a shout out. I told you about these schools. Some of the schools are so into it, and they have a cool school. So we had 22 different schools with teams that plunged. Our top winner was CVU, Champlain Valley Union. 200 kids
how
plunged.
wonderful.
They raised $50,000.
Oh my gosh.
Part of
shout
what
out
they
for
raised
sure.
is what's going to help send our USA team, because it's their basketball team that's going to get to go.
Oh, nice.
Along
how
with
good
some
for
swimmers
them.
and runners.
I tried it once.
You did the plunge?
I took it
Oh,
years ago.
wow,
but
good for you,
Just
Pat.
once.
Well, so I am
Learned my
on these
lesson.
shoulders is lots of ways that I'm working hard to raise money, and that's why
So
we
does
have
that fall
sponsors.
to you, or do you
yes,
have
it does.
Oh my word.
And our board. We have a wonderful board of directors.
Are they very active?
Yes, they're
That's good.
wonderfully active, and they were involved in the plunge. We're going to have a golf tournament, a board of directors golf tournament. We will be, hopefully, everyone will hear about our 50th anniversary events. We're having one in Woodstock and then one in Burlington at the UVM Alumni House the night of the opening of Summer Games.
Super. Oh, that's great. So let's talk about some of these programs because there's one, it's not really a program. I'm going to stick to that because I love any of this. Farm to Athlete,
Yes.
where you really think about the health of the athletes.
Thank you.
And I love Farm to Plate, Farm to whatever. I just think the whole thing is such a great idea.
We, of course, care greatly, and we'll talk about our health programming, about the nutrition and fitness and health of our athletes. And we wanted to make sure we were providing them with the best kind of food at our games,
Right.
Rather than the least expensive and most expedient. So that's a specific issue that we've raised money for, so that we are actually doing locally produced food. We're not just helping people eat healthy, we're helping to educate on the value of all that food.
That's great. You also have this thing, and I've read a lot about it, your Young Athletes program and your leadership programs. What
Fantastic.
That is
I know,
just,
it's amazing.
I mean, really.
Okay, so our young athletes, what our sports programming begins at age 8 to adult. And we have program opportunities for sports all along the spectrum. But we didn't have anything for young kids. Well, we all understand, and everybody's learning more and more about the importance of early childhood education. Same thing for us. So we have a specific program that is really community-based, happening in more and more preschools, where we bring, again, it's an inclusive, a unified, so kids with and without disability are not identified as such, age 2 to 7. It's fitness, it's movement.
Right.
And what's amazing, because this has been happening across the country, and there's been research that they've demonstrated that with this 8-week course, they have seen 7 months of developmental improvement among our athletes with disabilities. So you can just imagine, when I grew up, first of all, I rarely saw people with disabilities, but I certainly didn't see them as peers in the way that we do now.
Sure.
But we're starting at age 2 not to identify people based on their differences, but simply in a group together. And I think that the way we are no longer socializing to see difference, but in fact to be inclusive, is really going to be fundamentally important.
Well, I told you before, I said that there's a few things the state does very well. This is one of them, how we've become inclusive, because I think the kids want to feel that they've accomplished stuff. When you say that you see 7 months of
developmental improvement.
Is that mental development or
Yes.
physical?
Well,
because you're
development
stimulating everything pretty much.
In a 2-year-old, we're looking at everything from physical to emotional, to social, to intellectual development. Those are the ways that we're looking at the changes. Just by interacting with peers, by having different role models, by having different peer groups than has been in the past.
Years ago, when you were talking in the 60s, it was all about isolation. You didn't want to go out with your son or daughter. And now, I mean, the sky's the limit for these kids.
And I want to mention, to your point, family members. You know, it used to be, I've heard people my age who were said when their child was born with Down syndrome, your child will never walk, will never talk. But then they discovered Special Olympics. And now their kids are earning medals.
Well, and they're with their peers.
They are with their peers.
So they can feel, they can just achieve what they want to achieve.
And the family members
you're going to make me cry.
Well, there are a lot of tears shed. It really
I envy your job.
Thank you. I'm
great.
really honored.
Seriously.
I really am so happy.
Yeah. Well, I went to the disability. I'm sorry, Sue. I went to the Disability Awareness Day at the State House the other day. We videotaped it, and we're going to do a show about it with Sterling Peebles, my best friend there. But the halls were full of people, and the young people were trying to reach out to the legislators, and the stories that they were telling. Oh my goodness!
It's really extraordinary.
Yeah, it's amazing. Amazing.
You mentioned about our leadership program, and we will talk about our health program.
Yep.
So we have a program called Global Messenger Training, Leadership Development. And we've trained some of our athletes to really be able to share their stories publicly. So I was in Washington, D.C. with one of our athletes, Dayton Orton. We got to meet personally with Senator Leahy, Congressman Welch, and staff from Senator Sanders' office, who was running a hearing, so he couldn't be there personally, but would have. But to see Dayton, who has now received this training and is a global messenger, tell his story and how much Special Olympics has transformed his view of his own self.
Oh, nice.
And so that's what we're doing, and at all of the events, I go talk with Rotary groups. We will have more and more of our leaders.
Great. I love that title,
Global Messenger.
I love it. It's just great.
It's a perfect description, because when you hear people's story, it changes you. And that's what we're trying to do, is change attitudes and perceptions and build this greater inclusion.
Oh, my goodness. Very nice. But how did, at the schools, how does that work? You have somebody that volunteers for Special Olympics at each school, or it's part of their curriculum?
Yes, so we really just try to find champions at the school,
Okay.
and it's really, we're hoping to find more of them at more schools. At CVU, there's one great teacher who everybody loves, and he kept growing his hair for 6 years. He said, when we get more than 200 people doing the
Oh,
plunge,
really?
I'll cut my hair. I was there when they'd shaved
Oh,
his hair.
no
The whole
kidding. I
school
love it.
came
That's-
out. It was a pep rally. But it's really
Cool.
based on who wants to do it. So we're at conferences, we're really trying to share what this opportunity is. And I was at a conference recently looking at what's happening in other parts of the country. Texas, for example, a border state. There was a really inspiring firebrand leader who was actually, he had been the principal of a middle school. Now he was the deputy superintendent of an entire school district. And this is Texas,
Yeah.
rapidly
Yeah, right.
growing,
Right.
huge. One district is the size of our entire
Yes,
school
exactly.
population. He's gone district-wide with Unified. And why? Because they see the value it brings in improving performance, but most importantly, improving climate.
Wow.
One of the schools I went to, I heard later after we went there that they had had a rash of suicides, a lot resulting from cyberbullying. So that school district embraced our program. It's called the Unified Champion Schools Program. There's 3 elements. There's unified sports, but there's also youth leadership and what they call whole school engagement. So we saw a play, an inclusion play with Unified, people with and without disabilities. And to see a senior in high school being a partner to an athlete and an actor in this case, who really could not verbalize at all. And to see the empathy
Nice.
from that young man, it was very
This
beautiful.
should go a long way to stop bullying, because
And they've said it does.
they've picked on kids that they think are a little weaker or a little different, and now they find maybe they're not so different.
And it turns it on its head,
Yeah.
and it really
That's
makes
great,
a
Sue.
difference. And the more that people get to know one another
Yeah.
and are intimate and empathic, that's when we make real change. So very exciting.
Oh,
I want to mention my health program.
Yes, I was going to tell you to ask you. I've left quite a bit of time so you can go right into it.
Great.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea that Special Olympics did this. We're actually, when you look at it globally, the largest public health provider for people with intellectual disabilities in the world. And that's because at our games all over the world, we are doing specific health exams for our athletes. So here in Vermont, we do 5 different exams. We do them at our largest games in the summer and in the fall. They include vision, hearing, dental, nutrition, and physical therapy. And again, this is happening across the country, around the world, and one of the things that Special Olympics does is track data. And so they've done an analysis when you look across the whole United States programming. Of every team, I have to look at my notes so I get it
Go
right,
right
of
ahead.
every team of 10 Special Olympic athletes, and we're not talking Unified, these are people with intellectual disabilities, 4 have untreated tooth decay, 4 need eyeglasses, 5 have significant problems with flexibility, 3 fail a hearing test,
Oh,
2 have low bone density, and 6 are overweight or obese or at risk for chronic health conditions. So we understand our athletes are not getting preventative primary care. So not only are we doing these exams, we're giving away glasses, we're setting up
Sue.
hearing aids, we're getting people to their dentist if they need a referral. There's so much more we could do,
you
but we're
obviously have a
starting
lot
this.
of doctors who are volunteering their time.
Exactly. So
God
we
bless
have
them.
and that's the other side of this, is that we're helping to train the next generation of medical professionals to learn how to treat and communicate with people with intellectual disabilities, because it's a two-way
'Cause I was going
street.
to think, I don't think the kids, maybe if the parents are so involved with their kids that they bring them to Special Olympics, I doubt that they are, quote, neglecting them, but maybe the child can't express, I can't see, how, you need
So
to be
there are a lot
specially
of-
trained, I think, to get that answers from them, right?
Well, and I think that there's just a lot of barriers. There's fear, maybe something, they've had an experience that was
Oh, that could be.
traumatizing, whether it was a
Right,
shot.
yeah.
And also we have not been trained in how to interact with
Right.
people with intellectual disabilities, let alone to understand the range of their challenges and opportunities. So what we are doing is training our future practitioners, but we're also really beginning this conversation around what does inclusive health look like? How do we get our pediatricians to really break down some of the barriers that inhibit continuous preventive care? Because clearly we have a lot of undiagnosed challenges. Why is that? So, I have on my board of directors and as advisors and partners, doctors who are actually,
Nice.
this is their world of research and engagement around improving the practice.
Right.
And we are working with the Department of Health and associated partners with the School of Nursing and Physical Sciences at UVM, with the College of Education at UVM. So we really are trying to build our partnerships because we're all learning this together. This is new stuff.
Right.
It's groundbreaking and it's
great.
exciting.
But is it worldwide here? This is something that the Special Olympics is starting all over the world or specific in the U.S.?
In the U.S. and in other countries, but each
mostly
place is
here,
very
yeah.
different. I was at a conference and learned how Canada, all of Special Olympics, it isn't sort of a volunteer and, private fundraising. It's
Right.
really part of the government. So it's much more widely implemented and part of their public health program and services. But obviously, we're different here. So that's why it's so important for us in Vermont to be growing this. I think we should be out in front. We're such an important state, paving the way in terms of, I think, reforming the delivery of our health care. We are really one of the leaders in the medical home, and I want to really see part of what we accomplish is making sure people with disabilities are really thought about in this new wave
great.
of reform.
That's great. Oh, I'm just so impressed. I really had no clue till I started I'm like,
Researching.
really?
You did a lot of good
Yes.
research.
Were
'cause
you
I'm-
surprised when you took this job? I think
I
all
was
the-
completely, I had
yeah.
no idea. So I, found out that they were looking, I interviewed, I talked to people, and the more I began to learn, the more inspired I
Right,
was,
this
and the
is
more
for
I
me.
felt like I got to do this.
Yeah, really.
How could I turn it
I'd
down?
be right there with you. So I read in one of your articles, they had a head and said, what is your vision for the future of Special Olympics? So I will re-ask the question to you.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, here we are in the 50th year. It's actually the 50th anniversary of Special Olympics International is 2018. The Vermont Special Olympics 50th is in 3 years. So I am pulling
Wait,
together.
do that again for me. I just
So-
blocked out there for a second.
So
What is it?
International Special
It's
Olympics
50.
is 50.
Okay.
The Vermont Special Olympics Vermont
Oh,
was
okay.
started 3 years later.
Oh.
So I'm starting a 3-year plan to grow all of our programs by 50%.
Oh, awesome.
So I want to get more schools engaged, more young athletes into our programming. We know the impact and the power of that. I want more volunteers. I want better coaches training. Obviously, I need to raise the money so that we can do that, because I do want to emphasize that athletes and their families participate in our games free of charge. The areas, the county areas or the school base, they help raise money and we raise money. We
Great.
all work together. That Winter Games costs in the order of $100,000.
I saw that. I went, whoa.
So we've got a lot of fundraising to do. That's
Right.
why we have the Penguin Plunge, $500,000
Yeah.
in one day. That's why we're having this weekend in Stratton. We're having another plunge. I'm
Great.
going in again.
Yeah, not me. I passed. I thought it was brave just doing it once. So I forget I was doing it with the people from the Merchants Bank. I was like, ah.
Most
is
importantly,
cool.
I want to make sure we're creating more opportunities for
Right.
more athletes.
Right.
It's tough. I was meeting with a group from Central Vermont this weekend, and transportation, Pat, we know it. People are isolated. How can I raise the money
Yeah,
to get a
welcome to
van to
Vermont.
get everybody?
Right.
But there are many barriers. There are barriers to entry for our athletes, for their families. There's barriers to health care and early childhood, and I really just want to help make sure that we get more going.
I would love to be with an athlete who, when you put those glasses on,
Can see.
and can see
I
and can
know.
do his or her sport with safely, because that's a risk right there.
And hearing.
Yeah, and hearing.
So we will be inviting you to come to summer games and to observe it.
Oh, we would love that.
That'd
really.
be great. Because that's where the big exams start happening.
Yeah. So talk about your volunteers, because I want our viewers to pay attention here. They come from all walks of life, obviously from doctors to
Right.
To whomever.
A lot of retired folks
Yeah.
and also kids. And so we've got, at the Winter Games, as I said, we had about 200 athletes. I want to mention the third day of our games was a unified snowshoe competition, so that was a school-based program. But when you put it all together, those 3 days, we had 250 athletes, we had 150 volunteers. So we are very busy recruiting. GE gave, there are some businesses, National Life, I think, sent some employees.
Anyway. Yeah.
But they allow their employees to come, and it was during a work day.
They give them time off, yeah.
Exactly.
They do that.
So we are constantly recruiting. Anyone can volunteer. You do have to go through a background check. We do some same-day things, but we are also looking for volunteers to be coaches.
Right.
And the more coaches we can find, recruit, and train, the more sports we're going to be able to bring on and more teams to our games.
So if you were going to bring a doctor on the show, but he couldn't make it because he had something else scheduled, is he somebody that works with the other doctors? Do they have to be trained to learn how to deal with the kids?
So one of our wonderful partnerships with Special Olympics International is that they really create these exams, and they pay to bring volunteer clinicians to get trained in DC. So all of the key leaders of these programs these exams will get trained specifically by trainers in DC. They're going to come back, and then they're going to work on training those others that come over the weekend. The doctor who wasn't able to be here, he's on our board of directors.
Right.
He serves a number of roles. He's done a ton of research on autism and how we treat differently. He also is interested in healthcare reform, but he's also our medical coordinator, so he spent all weekend at the games to make sure that our athletes are well cared for, to make sure that they knew at the hospital that we did have a broken leg of one of our athletes. Dear. So we want to make sure people who understand the ways in which we best treat our athletes are with them and well cared for and well organized. So that's part of what we do and what Dr. Steve Contempassis does with us and for us.
That's excellent.
Again, we work with other docs who this is their passion, and they really see Special Olympics as a vehicle for improving healthcare delivery throughout the state for people with special needs.
That's great. Because what's inside these athletes is just, I've told this story before. I attended the 50th anniversary for Washington County Mental Health. And there was a panel of maybe in their 20s, 30s, men that are verbally just can't communicate. And they taught them how to use a typewriter, how old am I? Use a computer, thank you. And what they produced from inside, the poems, the thoughts, the expressions, it was just
unbelievable.
I was so taken aback by, they used bigger words than I even know, and they were just so powerful. And they can't express themselves.
And now the computers can speak for them.
Right, exactly.
They type and speak. You're reminding me of one of the other passionate members of our board, Melinda Moulton, whose grandson.
I know Melinda for sure.
Well, what a firebrand! Her grandson has that condition of autism where he can't speak. Well, he was on the dance floor. We were all on the dance floor. That's something that we do on one of the nights.
You have a big event at nighttime, right?
That's right. Yeah. And to see him and his family there dancing in the joy and happiness, and he was a gold medal winner at our Winter Games.
Right.
But we actually have a video on our website, Special Olympics Vermont,
actually. Yep.
where just what you're describing, someone who can't verbalize, and then to be given that opportunity to express and the beauty and the power of their words.
How sad to have that all bottled up inside and not be able to share when it's there.
I know.
And the gentlemen that were at the panel, they were just beaming because people were reading what they had written, and my eyes were like deer in headlight. I couldn't believe it. It was staggering. Melinda's wonderful. She's on Facebook a lot, and she's so proud of her grandson, and I forget his name, but we probably shouldn't repeat it anyway. But she's so great with him.
I know, and
just so proud.
She was one of the real reasons that I started looking into this job, because learning the impact that it has, not just for her grandson, but for literally 1,700 athletes around our state participate in our programs. And you know, this weekend to experience their joy, especially getting those medals from the law enforcement in their uniforms. It's really wonderful. But then to realize that it isn't just about them and their sports and improving their lives, which is so fundamental, so real, so rewarding, but it's about changing our culture. And that excites me. And I see the potential, and I see what's happening. And I see that we in Vermont, we're small. I mean, our organization is small.
Some of the stuff we do. We don't have a lot of the barriers that the bigger cities have. And plus, we have people with very big hearts here.
Oh my gosh,
who love our
it
children.
Is so true.
Do you get to go to the legislature at all? Or?
So because I didn't have to ask for money, I didn't go into the appropriations process. I'm pleased. You know, some of our different states have big appropriations from their state legislature. We don't. We have a couple of small grants.
Yeah.
But I went when we had an event to publicize the Penguin Plunge, and we got 5 legislators to step up and join my team, and they were the plunging Pauls.
Oh, that's so cool.
And they raised something like $6,000, and they were fantastic, and I think we're going to have more next year.
Well,
they had a great time.
Good.
They've started
That's
it.
Good.
And I will be bringing, and maybe you would come and join us, I'm going to bring our USA Games team in April for a resolution. And I want to introduce them in the House and have and teach people through our resolution all the things that we do, because as you know, we don't know.
This is staggering, Sue, seriously. You mentioned background checks, which of course makes a lot of sense, but that alone is more than $1.98. If you have to, we have to do a couple of thousand volunteers. That's a lot of background checks.
It is, and we have to keep them up to date. And even though the school does them, we have to do them again in our own. It's all part of obviously our insurance and liability and risk. And this national organization, Special Olympics North America, which is within the umbrella of Special Olympics International, ensures that we do all of that.
So do you report to the big Special Olympics in the sky? Is there something in the United States, and then they report to a world? How does that organization work?
Yes, we are an international organization, and we have accreditation from them, but we are our own 501c3 here in Vermont. So we don't have to report up, but more importantly, they help train us, they inspire us, they help resource us, and you know, they help go to Congress and get a major grant from the U.S. Department of Education, and there's a pass-through to us. So we benefit from an amazing partnership.
You can learn from them best practices, new ideas.
We don't need to redevelop the wheel.
Yeah, no, well, that's what actually, in DMV, they had a list of all of the things that every DMV does in the United States, and it was called Not Reinventing the Wheel.
Yeah.
So we would strike out Illinois and put Vermont and move ahead, because why not learn from people who have already done it?
But we still have the flexibility locally to do what we want. So I have an independent board and 501c3. I am not required to do things, but they encourage us. So, and again, they inspire. We've been doing these health exams. I want to grow it to include mental health, a program called Strong Minds. Perfect. We don't do that yet, and I think it's fundamentally important. So that's in the next year one of my key goals.
This state is really struggling with mental health. Mm-hmm. I can't believe where we are sometimes.
I know.
With the mental health issues. Every story that's not so good, seems to be some component of mental health in there.
Well,
it's really
certainly
sad. So good for
crisis
you.
Proportions.
Is that an issue in this group of folks, the athletes? Do they
Sure.
struggle like
I mean,
anybody
wellness,
else, right?
Wellness, and I think even more, and the difficulty of communicating, and obviously it's going to take a lot of training and special volunteers who want to provide that kind of opportunity.
Do you do any work with their parents, just to give them the support they need?
You know, I wish we had more ability to do more. I think I can tell you without a doubt that coming to our Winter Games is an extraordinarily positive experience for parents. And I think parents meet parents. And that's why the young athletes, for new parents who don't know what their opportunities are and are probably really fearful and concerned, they meet other parents.
That's
and so we find that our programs bring parents together. We don't have, at this point, anything specifically for the parents.
Well, you've got so much on your plate now.
Yeah, we focus on the athletes, but often their wellness really is concurrent.
Do you have
with
any
the
really
parents.
awesome stories that maybe you could share with us about I don't know, that's putting you on the spot, but
but I tell you,
there
will
must be
just
hundreds
say,
of them.
being with Dayton in Washington, D.C. for several days and seeing, it was very nerve-wracking, I think, for him to be speaking and meeting with
Now, how
Senator
old was
Leahy.
this young man?
He's 19.
Wow.
He's at
That's
Essex
hard for
High
a
School.
19-year-old.
Yes,
Never
of
mind
course.
anybody with the disabilities.
And I didn't know exactly how it was going to go. Well, he was so eloquent. And he's the one who says, when I had that pass from a varsity athlete, I saw myself for my abilities and not my disabilities. What a beautiful and compelling story. But here's another interesting story that I think is so important. We talk about this unified sports and what does it do. I was at the Penguin Plunge and talking to some parents who were watching their kids dive into Lake Champlain at 14 degrees.
Right.
I said, I can't believe your kids are doing it. I can't believe I'm about to do it. Why do they do it? And what gets them involved? And the parents just are glowing. They said, one of them said, my daughter is a senior. She's been doing this for 3 years. She said, we can always tell when it's unified season. She's a different person.
Oh, really?
She's more empathic.
Huh.
Yeah. And
That's fabulous that they noticed it too. So there must be something really intense happening.
I think
Because
it
she's
is
playing
really,
with kids with disabilities.
and she realizes probably more than normal
Right.
how much she has and
Right.
her gratitude,
Right.
and then her ability to connect with people who are so different and to
great.
create a bond where there wasn't one before for that individual.
What a great lesson, because I hope I can explain this right, because it's not an in-your-face thing, mom lecturing to you about, do you realize how much you have? She's working with a young man or a young woman who has some struggles, and maybe she's thinking, wow.
Yeah, and at that age. And that's why I think it's so important that we're active in the schools,
That's
because
great.
we know that there's so much dividing going on. And if this can be a way that we bring people together in a really different way, and to have seen in Texas what that did for an entire school. They do unified cheerleading, and they do unified choral and drama, and they do peer mentoring, peer counseling, so tutoring. Perfect. So we went and got a discussion from, how there's often an aide and there's tutoring that goes along. Well, now it's peer-to-peer tutoring.
Perfect.
And it was transformational for both people.
Right.
And
because that helps, may I say, that helps the teacher. I remember when I was in the legislature in House Education, a teacher came in and she had 7 students on an IEP. And then she had 7 aides. And she's like, help me. Because she not only has to deal with her class, the 7 kids who need special help, but then she's got the 7 adults there. And it's like, so to have a child mentor another child, how perfect is that?
I know.
That's just perfect.
And then I want to mention this part about leadership, because we've talked about the global messengers, but part of this Unified Champion Schools program is also really empowering kids to lead. And so when I was in Texas at a particular school, the whole program, there were 500 of us, the whole program was run by 2 students, one with and without disabilities, and they were the leaders. And to see the role of leadership and empowerment, and again, this generation seeing what they're capable of and how they can change the world.
That's great.
And doing it.
Right. Well, I think you're going to do a fabulous job. The energy
Pat.
and the excitement is just palpable. It's great.
It is a really,
You've
it's a
really-
gift.
You've really
it's my gift.
won the grand prize. What is that? The gold ring. That's
Yeah.
really great, Sue. Thank you very much.
Thank
Well,
you.
we have
So
a minute.
nice.
Is there anything we haven't talked about? I should ask you first.
Well, I'm so glad we talked about the 50th anniversary, USA Games, the health programming. I guess I want to say, I hope people will open their hearts and minds and come and volunteer. We call it a magic. Once you enter the magic of Special Olympics, you're hooked.
Yep.
And we have many, many repeat volunteers. And so on June 1st, will be the big summer games at University of Vermont.
Great.
And we'll have a big fundraiser on the Friday the 1st, and the games are the 2nd and 3rd. I also want to encourage people to get involved in their schools. We only have 16 schools competing in our championship game. The big championship is May 10th at UVM. But tune in, because there's so many kids in school that aren't able to make it onto their varsity team, or want to do something else, another sport. And this is a great way to see how sport can change lives and change the world. Excellent. So getting involved, helping us grow our programs and our opportunities. We have a really neat idea to try to see if Burlington or maybe the state or other cities will be cities of inclusion on the 22nd of July, when we are celebrating the 50th anniversary in Chicago. It's going to be a global day of inclusion.
Wonderful.
So everyone and anyone can come up with something to be a part of this, whether it's doing recreation, unified sports in their town, whether it's maybe bringing this idea of inclusion and what does it mean and how can we do better. There's so many ways to be involved, and it really comes from our volunteers.
And I love what you said before, don't look to the disabilities, look to the abilities.
Absolutely.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week. We're going to follow up this interview with some pictures for you and 1 or 2 videos about the Special Olympics. So thank you for tuning in. In the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites. Thanks, Sue, very much again.
Thank you, Pat. So great to be with you.
Thank you.
It's regular sports that partners and athletes with special needs play together and strive for a common goal of having fun and winning medals sometimes. And
you don't have to work hard to enlist people to be partners. They're signing up. They want to do it. It's part of the fiber of the community now.
I think probably his greatest response to us was, it was like a normal game. Because he's been to many games, high school games and things like that. And he said, Mom, they sang the national anthem.
In the games we had in the playoffs, we just had hundreds of students. We had more students than we get for our regular basketball games. Every seat was packed. So these kids got that same opportunity to see what it's like for the entire school to get behind you.
They treat it like a real game. They let us be able to sing the national anthem. They lined us up and we clapped hands with the coaches. It felt like this is the real thing.
Unified basketball brings everybody on the inside, You see it. You see people making eye contact with people they used to not make eye contact with as a result of those events. They're important because it's about defining the values of our community.
Sometimes the athletes might need help in certain things and the partners can help them, and it also just creates relationships between the two groups that are often distant.
All the teamwork and just showing that even if kids have special needs, they can still work as a transmission, or it's also like a watch. It has to keep precise times because of these tiny, tiny gears meshed together. I believe that even these kids can still make that little mesh of gears run smoothly.
We won a state championship, so I got the feeling of just the exuberance of the state championship with these kids, which just made it extra special. And Justin McQuiston has watched every CVU sports game almost, every team. For him to run in front of the stands with a big trophy, raising it over his head was just like a dream come true to him.